Studying the Word of God can be difficult. One of the easiest ways to study the Bible is one verse at a time, but at times it can seem overwhelming. Our goal in this podcast is to wrestle with the text and dive in deeper. We pray that this edifies you and empowers you to fall deeper in love with the Bible and Jesus. Welcome to Everyday Theology. Welcome again to another episode of Everyday Theology. I'm frazzled. My name is Guy Parkerson. I'm here with my best friend today, Ian Stamps. How are you?
Yeah, buddy. I'm the best friend today.
You are, man.
Nice.
It's weird having you over there.
It's because I'm in John's seat, right? That's why. Oh, this is normally your seat. Right?
Well,
Isn't that John's
in
seat?
the new studio, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
You keep switching things around.
I know.
It's not me. It's John.
The feng shui and the Wang Chung is all messed up.
It's out of whack.
Yep. Sean Newby, how are you today?
I'm fantastic. Thanks,
Good.
buddy.
And we have a guest today, Scott Camfield.
Good
You
morning.
know what? You're my best friend today. How are you?
Good. I came from Rent a Friend.
Man.
Rent a friend.
Rent a Friend. That's why
Rent a
I'm
friend?
here. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
To fill a spot.
Yeah. Well, John is in Little Galilee, isn't he?
He's at church camp,
Yeah.
with all of our middle school students from here and
200
a couple
and
hundred
some.
others. Yeah.
He enjoys that.
Oh, he loves it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good for him.
Good for him.
I'm glad he does.
That takes a special
It-
kind of person.
It does. I mean, those weeks can be so meaningful, and he's so good with working with students, and so God bless him and his family for him headed out there for the week, doing what he's doing.
Yep. Well, let's jump in. Acts 17, 16 through 34. You mentioned that this was one of the most preached sermons in...
This text gets more scholarly treatment than any other in the book of Acts because of Paul's sermon here. It's so different. So there are those who will say this is an example of Paul's missions type of sermon. Like, it's a Gentile only audience. So he doesn't explicitly mention Christ by name. He quotes their own philosophers. Therefore, today you can't really talk about Jesus with pagans. You have to know pagan philosophers and be able to go on their level. There are others even who say that Paul is gun shy here, that the reason he doesn't get too much into the gospel itself or Christ explicitly is he's had a couple of bad experiences in Thessalonica and Berea. Therefore, he just kind of plays it safe here in Athens because he's coming off of some ministry failures. All that's just goofy.
Yeah, I don't see that at all.
I don't buy it, because when you look at what Paul does actually say, it's deeply theological. Now it does hit differently, absolutely the case, because most of the time his audience that has been recorded so far are Jews who know the Old Testament scriptures, and he's reasoning from the Old Testament. He's not doing that here because that's not going to do any good.
Yeah.
They
He's
don't
got to
have
set a baseline.
Yeah, they don't have a concept of the Jewish Messiah. They're not Jewish. So he does quote their philosophers because Paul's highly educated and knows what they're saying and uses it as an inroad to make his points. Again, as I argued in the sermon, the theological foundation of a sermon is Isaiah. Everywhere throughout Isaiah, I mean, you could probably point to 10 different passages that Paul has pulled from that he is building this on. Again, from creation to consummation, this is thoroughly biblical. This isn't Paul cheating and watering down the message.
I thought this whole portion of scripture was a really good example of both, because at the beginning he's talking to Jews and God-fearers, and it says, and then the Epicurean Stoic philosophers, and he's talking about the good news of Jesus and the resurrection. And so then they bring him to the Athenian people.
Yep, Mars Hill.
Yeah, and they have, so he has to start from the very beginning, the God who made the world, right?
Yep.
I mean, I look at that as like when we go out and evangelize today, if you're going to be talking to a Mormon, for instance,
It's gonna be totally different.
who is somewhat familiar. You know,
Yep.
you don't have to
Right.
go back and talk about the God who created the world. Whereas if you're talking to an atheist or a pagan,
Yep.
you do have to go back there. So
Yep.
I thought it was a good example of
In
that.
my notes, I
Exactly.
put down he was essentially having 5 different debates. You know, the Epicureans, the philosophers, and then the Jews. What were the other two? I mean, he's covering a lot of
Yeah.
territory. And if
Yeah.
anybody's ever had a conversation with an atheist, it's completely different than having a conversation with a Jehovah's Witness.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, and Paul not only is quoting Isaiah, he quotes Greek philosophers. I mean, he's kind of meeting them where they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great, kind, merciful thing to do, because yeah, he could open up, and instead of saying the God who made the world, he could say, well, Genesis 1, says that, not that it would have been divided
That
into
means
chapters,
nothing to them.
It
Nothing.
means nothing.
Right.
They've never read the Old Testament. So he starts with some basics about a creator that most of them would have believed in some kind of creator. Even with their pantheon of gods, they're still talking about Zeus and those who, by their fighting with one another, ended up creating the world by accident,
hmm
and all of that. He's meeting them on common ground, and yeah, absolutely, we should do that. So I stood in a village in Ghana, West Africa, a couple of weeks ago to speak on unity and peace among pagans, Christians, and Muslims, so that human flourishing can happen in the region. Because if they don't get along, there's not clean water, and there's not sewage treatment, and there's not sustainable farming, and education for kids. So we all have to play nice in the sandbox together, so that women are safe and kids are safe, and there's all these good things that happen. So normally when I talk about unity in environments that I'm in, I'm going to Ephesians. I'm talking about in Christ. If you're not in Christ, there really isn't unity. We can't be in unity unless we're in union with Christ together, and all that. Well, you can't do that with pagans and Muslims in the audience because they're not in Christ. So, so after, when I was introduced, you get up and you face the village chiefs. I'm facing the village chief and the elders of the village. And then there's, hundreds of women, children, and men from the village all around, and kind of in a circle. And after I did the reverent welcome, and thank you for allowing us into your beautiful village, and it's my honor to be here. Once I did that, the first line of what I said to them was, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That was literally my first sentence. Now, did I have to say Genesis 1:1? I could have, because there's Muslims there. They like Genesis.
Mhm.
So they agree with that and believe that. Absolutely, yes. But that's not the case with everybody who's familiar with that. So I simply quoted Genesis 1:1 to begin to establish our shared humanity created in the image of God. That's all I had to do.
Yeah.
And they were with me. I didn't have to do some fancy thing about Genesis 1. I just had to establish, in the beginning, God made us all. And here's what that means.
So did the people at that time, did they believe that the cosmos was eternal and that the gods were part of the cosmos?
They wouldn't have believed it was eternal. So the typical, there are varied stories, obviously, through the pantheon of gods. And, they're borrowing from, there's Greek gods, there's Roman gods, they've got Egyptian gods there. So there's these various competing origin stories, because all of them have origin stories of the universe and of the world. Primarily how they go down, the most common factor is the gods were fighting. And in their fighting, or in whatever they did, they created the world. And now they're here to benefit from it.
Huh.
Why do you
Yeah.
ask that question?
Because it seems like, well, you had said, I don't remember if it was in, private conversation or in the sermon, but you had said that, they have all these different gods. There's the god of, you name it.
Oh yeah, they're everywhere. Yeah.
So obviously they're contingent of this world. And that's why Paul, he says, our God isn't of, what is it? Gold and silver. I mean,
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
saying our God is He's the creator of all of that.
Yeah. You can't fashion him into an idol. You can't determine what he looks like, because so think, history tells us there's a minimum of 73,000 idols and statues in this city of different things that they worship. How do they know that's what Anubis looked like? How do they know that's what Zeus looked like? Well, they don't. They have fabricated that. So somebody decided this is what Zeus looks like. So I'm going to fashion some gold or stone marble statue or something. And this is now Zeus.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, Zeus looks like an older, more muscular, wise version of me. Huh. Interesting how that works. So
that's the way I do it.
Yeah. So the whole point is, because God is the creator, he is above his creation. You cannot decide this is what he looks like and fashion a graven image of him, because that's bringing God down to your level, and he is above that.
And isn't it incredible that we still today could not put God in a box, even if we wanted to, because the whole Trinitarian God, we don't even know how to actually articulate that in a way that we could put God in a box, because it's so other than what we know.
Even when God comes to the earth in the form of a man, we still don't have pictures of him. The Bible does not give us a description of him.
What about the white surfer Jesus?
Oh, well, I mean, Buddy Jesus, he is the best. That's my Jesus, Sean.
Buddy Jesus.
He's the best one. The 70s long flowing hair, Jeffrey Hunter, the good looking surfer Jesus.
Straight white teeth.
White as the driven snow.
Yep.
Yes, man. So good, because a lot of those first century Middle Easterners were blonde with blue eyes. Really, that's how it worked. Why would the Bible not even give us a description? Because even then, we don't fashion him in our image. That's not our place to do that. Which is why, if your church has pictures of Jesus in it, take them down and throw them away. So every church I've ever grown up in has the same picture of Jesus. All of them. As a kid, when I started here, there was one here, and somehow they all disappeared, Guy. I'm not sure where they went, but they all did disappear. So that's a violation of the second commandment. We don't make pictures of the Lord. That's not our place. He is above all of that.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I found this interesting. So Paul is running from essentially the Thessalonian Jews, correct? Mm-hmm. So he's just like running.
Yep.
Is it Timothy and Silas? They drop him off at Athens, and they say, we're coming back.
Yep.
And you'd think Paul is. This is what I would do. I just got back from Chicago, and I walk around and I'm thinking, what can I visit? What can I eat? And Paul walks into the city and be like, look at all these idols.
Yeah.
I am going to stand in the town square and tell everybody.
They probably dropped him off and they're like, try and keep a low profile until we come back. Just don't get in any trouble.
Get a hotel room and don't order room service. Yeah. Don't go out.
And like you said, what he does is go right in and he's like,
yep,
I'm not going to pick
it.
I don't want to just pick a fight with the Jews. I want to grab the scholars, and I'm going after them. Everybody.
You know what? I'm going to pick a fight with Greek culture and the Roman Empire. So bring it on.
Do you think it's the way he delivered his message, or do you think they were more accepting to listen about this new God? Because it didn't seem like they were. I mean, a few of them seemed like they sneered, I guess, but overall, someone wanted to listen to him.
Yeah. That's one of the strengths of a diverse culture, is they're open to these things. These people are not hostile to a lot of gods, and they haven't heard of this Jesus. They don't like the idea of resurrection because they think that's nonsense. But hey, you're bringing knowledge of a God we don't know. We already have an altar to that God. So come and tell it. They don't mind debating that or the merit of that. And again, there's a case to be made that the reason they take him to the Areopagus is, all right, well, if you're introducing a God to us, it's up to that 30-member council. Are we going to build him a temple? Are we going to have an altar? Is there a statue going up? Do we have to figure out priests, what are we doing? And that's actually why Paul says what he says. He doesn't need a temple. He doesn't need priests. So no, that's not why I'm here, to get him among your pantheon of gods. He's above and beyond all of that.
Yeah.
So he
That-
doesn't need you.
That's where the enthusiasm would turn. It would be like, you need to get rid of all this stuff.
Yes. Yeah. He is the God
Yeah.
of the universe, he's one of the many. So yeah, just include him in your list and Jesus will be happy. Like, no, Jesus is only happy when he crushes all of the other ones.
Yep.
It's like the game of Monopoly. Nobody just wins at Monopoly. That's not the point of the game. The point of the game is to bankrupt everyone else. There can only be one. That's the whole point, which is why it's called Monopoly. Mono, one. So this is the stance of Jesus, the one true God. I don't stand on equal footing with 73,000 different gods and deities that you worship. I'm it.
Yeah.
You have to put all this nonsense away. And that's not what they did.
And I love the false accusations they throw at him, calling him a seed picker, which essentially means he's just taking little bits and pieces of, every religion.
I felt like I was maybe one of those.
What, a seed picker?
Or no,
You're a seed
what did
picker?
you call it? Stealing someone else's ideas?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So pulling from everybody else's, making them your own. So I couldn't have done this in the sermon because it gets a little on the crude side. So the Greek word is spermalogos. Sperm is the opening of that word. Which is seed, which is obviously where the idea of human sperm comes from. Logos word. So you've got the seed word idea. So the reason that it's a derogatory term is, all right, Sean, you're just going around and you're picking up these little ideas and you're crapping them out as your own.
Yeah.
So that's what they accuse Paul of doing. You're just going around picking up these various ideas. Again, he's talking about a creator. He's talking about a redeemer. These are common themes in other religions. And you're just pulling it, you're fabricating your own, and you're coming into this elite place and you're crapping out these ideas as if they're original to you. Well, they're not. We've got our ideas too. We can talk about a creator God too. So it is quite a derogatory sort of a thing that they label him, because who are you to come in and pretend to tell us that you have the corner on the market of the world of the gods?
So
we're Athens.
That's not
we do.
That's not the same as standing on the shoulders of giants, where
No.
you listen to these great theologians and
Right.
and okay, good. So I'm not a spermalogos.
You are not a spermalogos.
Okay.
You're not a seed stealer. So
What about Guy? He might be though.
He probably is.
I'm a total spermalogos.
That's what you get, man. You're just pooping all this stuff out as if it's your own. Yeah.
Isn't it interesting that the next verse or the next sentence is, others said he seems to be a preacher of foreign deities. And I found the word deities interesting, so I went back into different translations, and the King James said gods.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
literally the next sentence that they say after they accuse him of being a spermalogos, seed thrower, babbler, they totally get it wrong. Paul was professing one God, and they accuse him of being a preacher of foreign deities, like plural.
Yeah. So there's a scholarly argument as to why that is.
Yeah.
Strange deities, plural. So why is that? So the rest of verse 18, because he was proclaiming the good news of Jesus and the resurrection.
And Jesus is God.
So yes, but Jesus and the resurrection. So later on, historically, one of the pantheon of gods becomes anastasis, which is resurrection. It's the word for resurrection, which is the word that is used here in verse 18. So there's a case to be made that they are accusing him of preaching two gods, Jesus and resurrection, that those are separate gods.
So they were wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So from their vantage point, it makes all the sense in the world because everything's a god.
Sure.
So resurrection is its own God. So there's Jesus. Okay. and there's Anastasis. Okay, we'll worship her too.
Okay.
Oh my! They couldn't get it.
They cannot
were
get their head
so-
around one true God. They can't, because all they live in is this world of everything is to be worshipped. And if we don't, man, we're going to get in trouble, because that unknown God's going to show up in our village and in the city of Athens, and he's going to blow us up because he's offended.
You made the comparison. You talked a little bit about like India today. I mean, that seemed like a really good comparison. I know you've talked a lot about that with us before, telling us about it, and that sounds a lot like the way Athens was.
Oh man, it again, I've been to India a number of times. A very dear friend is a missionary there, and we have loved going to see him. It's flat out dangerous to go. And we've had some issues, stories for another day. We've had some issues where we had to cancel some plans and move some things around because the Hindus got word that, American Christian pastors are in town and it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
So they hide us in a hotel for, 4 or 5 hours in an afternoon, and, bump the thing that I'm going to preach at to the next day. We've had some of those things where we're sort of on the run with some issues. And India it's dark. It's a dark place because Hinduism is a dark religion. Because when you worship 330 million gods, it's superstition. It's this pagan, idolatrous goofiness. Again, the river Ganges is one of the gods. The cows, why are there the sacred cows? Well, one of the gods rides on a cow, so now cows are sacred and they're everywhere. The deadliest train wreck in history was in India because there was a cow laying on the tracks and the train hit it and derailed and killed thousands of people. And the caste system in India that's so well known around the world, that's an invention of Hinduism. And it is the most evil system on the planet. Hinduism is the most evil religion on the planet because it creates things like this. And so that Hinduism isn't new. that concept isn't new. People have always worshipped stupid things.
That's just got to feel so empty, never being able to.
Yep. Well, because one's not good enough.
Yeah, ever.
So you have to keep worshiping. So where do you stop? So by that worldview, the Hindus are right. Why would we stop at 330 million?
Yeah.
Let's just have more. Otherwise, if I miss, that blade of grass is its own God. Well, if I don't acknowledge that blade of grass is going to rise up and kill my kids.
Yeah.
And I'm going to have a bad harvest this year, and I'm going to be poor and destitute. Or in my next life, I'm going to be a bug. Whatever it might be. It's just
It's
goofiness.
insanity. Yeah.
So literally, somebody could just create a god at any point in time. Take it to Mars Hill and be like, this is a new god.
Yep.
And they were probably accepting of it because
Of course they were.
chronological snobbery. Then, we've got a new god. This is great.
Yeah.
Paul comes in and been like, all your gods don't even exist.
Yeah, none of them are real.
So he's lucky he didn't get stoned again.
Yeah. Well, and here's talk about chronological snobbery. Here's what we've done
Oh yeah.
in the West, in our enlightened, civilized cultures. So, because we can look at these other cultures, you look at Ghana, you can look at India, you look at Athens, whatever, and they're like, oh, look, these pagans back in the Stone Age, and this is so dumb. Well, here's what we've done with our enlightened sensitivities in our world. Well, if anything can be a god, so can I.
Mm-hmm.
So guess what I'm going to worship? I'm going to worship me. I don't have to worship the sun. I don't have to worship the moon. I don't have to worship crops. I don't have to worship a river. Oh, that's stupid. So instead, because I'm so developed and enlightened, I'm obviously the only deity here. You're God. You're God. You're God. So how cool is that?
Mm-hmm.
So we will condemn them for being so backwards and dark and unenlightened. We've done exactly the same thing and decided I'm the center of the universe.
Kind of reminiscent of Satan.
Yeah. I don't know.
Satan. But we also do that with, as Christians, for things that we replace God with, like our time we spent doing, their God could be work, their God could be their hobby, whatever it is, sports, whatever it is.
Retirement, vacation
Retirement,
plans, whatever it is.
Yep.
Whatever
Facebook.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, your phone. Yeah,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
We have millions of gods.
We worship anything and everything. When you understand what worship is, the offering of devotion to, what you give your time to, what you give your money to, what you give your heart to. We have just as many gods as any other culture in the history of the world. Ours just have names that are enlightened and developed. We don't call him Ahura Mazda like they used to. We don't call him Zeus. Like, well, that's stupid pagan idolatry. But yeah, I'll worship money, and I'll worship my job, and I'll worship sports, and
Cell phone.
I'll worship my cell phone.
Ranger boat.
Yep.
Yeah, fill in my own comforts, my retirement plans.
Mm.
This is where I place my hope and my trust. Well, those are the things that you worship.
Yep.
It was Luther who said, the human heart's an idol-making factory. This is just what we do because we're worshiping creatures. So we just make stuff up to worship.
It's an idol-making factory, but do you think ultimately it's trying to point us to the one true God?
Mm-hmm.
There's a God-shaped hole in our heart.
I absolutely believe
You love
that, which I think is what Paul does here. It's why he's so kind to them. It's why he's polite to them. He's respectful to them. I mean, to a certain point, and then he's very clear. You're very religious. I would argue he's meaning superstitious. It's the negative side of that. But he's acknowledging, hey, you say you don't know this unknown God. Well, right, therefore you're in ignorance. So let me tell you the truth. Let me give you the knowledge that you need. This I proclaim to you. And all of that is designed to point us towards there is a God. There is something out there that is worthy of our worship. Why are we worshiping creatures? Why has every culture in the history of the world worshipped something or someone? That's true in every capacity. Isolated cultures, one from another. Everyone has had their pantheon of gods, all of them. Where does that come from? Well, it's obviously embedded in the soul.
Yeah.
It's stamped on us. Also that Paul says, verse 27, that they would seek God. So why do we have the world that we have, and why has God set up the boundaries that he's set of when you live and where you live and how long you live? It's so that you'll acknowledge there's somebody in charge of your life that's not you. This is why we worship. This is why we acknowledge there is something there.
That bleeds into what we were just talking about. You were talking about Romans 1
Mm-hmm.
and, that it's self-evident. It's self-evident, and therefore you are searching for something to worship. Everyone, like you said, isolated island somewhere, and they're going to be worshiping a volcano because that volcano erupts and gets angry, and that must be what's in charge, right?
Yeah. It's more powerful than me.
Yep.
I can't control it. Therefore, it must control me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's actually get into that. My son little guy sent me a text last night, and it said, what about the people on isolated islands, don't speak our language, we're not welcome there. What happens to them if we're unable to reach them with the gospel? Is God just mean? Do they have the ability to come to Christ? What if they don't?
That
It's a very good question.
Very insightful.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant questions that has overlapping theologies to it. One, you've got the sovereignty of God in salvation. God saves who he's going to save, period. That's a fact. So if someone dies unsaved, it's because God didn't want them to be saved. God has determined that they were not his. 40,000 people every single day die outside of Christ. Every day. So the danger is us looking at that island or that people group or that person that we know and go, wow, God's a jerk that he wouldn't have done whatever he could have done to save them.
If they'd only heard the gospel.
Yeah, right. Well, 40,000 people will die today
In America who've
outside
heard the
of
gospel.
Christ.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is, history tells us this is fact, that a lot of people die without faith in Christ. God really does send people to hell. That's reality. So what happens if we don't get the gospel to them? Well, then they die outside of it. I'm not trying to be cold-hearted. Again, let's just talk facts here.
Yeah.
They're going to die outside of it, and they're going to be in hell forever. Now, why? Why would that happen?
Well, can I say something real quick?
Yeah,
Just real quick.
Please.
There's only two possibilities. Either he ordains that to be, or he's unable to save them, right? I mean, those are the
Yes.
only two possibilities.
Yep.
And
So will they stand before God? This is a question for you to say yes or no to, Sean. Will that tribe, let's say there's an earthquake and everybody on that island dies today, because that could happen.
Mhm.
There's a tsunami, whatever, and they all die, and they all stand before God. Is the scenario that they're going to stand before God and go, what gives, man? This is all real? I've been worshiping a little wooden statue in my hut on my island in my loincloth and spear, because I know what island he's talking about, that kills missionaries anytime they try to get close. That happened just a few years ago. Actually, a guy got on a boat relatively close.
I
and
remember that.
They got him with the spear from like 100 yards away while he's still out in the boat. And so they're going to stand before God. And is God going to say to them, oh, guys, I'm sorry. Man, I tried. I couldn't get anybody to get past the language barrier. I couldn't get anybody there to change the laws so that, because it's illegal to get to that particular island. So I couldn't get the politicians to change those laws. So, man, I'm really sorry that I couldn't get this done for you. So good luck in hell.
Yeah.
Is that what's going to happen?
Not my God.
Good answer, New.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Good answer. You're paying
Yeah.
attention.
Because if people's salvation is fully dependent on us or on that particular person, that's the scenario. It's God's fault. So it's not really ultimately our fault, because we could blame ourselves. We didn't get the gospel in time. We didn't do this, and we'll mourn all of that. But ultimately, it's God's fault. If he's sovereign over the universe and orchestrating some things, if he really is all powerful, then he failed to get that done. So that's not an option that the Bible would even allow us to take. So we have to take the other one, that God is doing this. And God sends people to hell every single day. We have to acknowledge that fact. So could it be that if the gospel does get to them, so let's say it does. Let's say tomorrow, some missionary rose up on a boat and they decide, we're going to let him on the island. We're not going to kill him. We're not going to eat him. We're going to let him on the island. And he learns the language, or she, whoever, learns the language, adopts into the culture, and is able to share the gospel, to bring, maybe they translate the Gospel of Mark into their language. Is that going to save the island? Is the whole tribe going to come to Christ? No, it's not. Some might. Certainly possible. That could be what God has ordained. But that doesn't automatically mean that everybody's going to be saved. And here's how we know that. We live in America. There are churches on every street corner. The gospel is assumed in our culture. Our politicians will quote Bible verses on national television.
Out of context.
Sure. And is America saved? No.
Far
from
from
it.
it.
Yeah, that's just not the case. So, what is the explanation for that? If the gospel, when it comes into a culture and it doesn't save everybody, what's the explanation? There's only one. That's God. God has blinded some people. So, the tribe on this island, they have rejected natural revelation, which is clear. Romans 1. Clearly seen from what has been made.
Let's read it.
Yeah.
For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, that is, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen and perceived, being understood by what was made, so that they are without an excuse.
That's about as definitive as it gets.
Yeah.
So they have suppressed the truth of creation for whatever reasons, to come up with whatever ideas about themselves and the world that they have. They have rejected God in that. And instead, as Romans 1 will continue, they reject this natural revelation and they begin to worship the creation. So they fashioned idols, and every society in the history of the world has done that very same thing. They begin to worship not the creator, but the creation itself. So now they're pagan idolaters on top of suppressing the truth of general revelation. So God has every reason in the world to condemn them to eternity and separation from him, period.
Yeah,
He does.
the without excuses, it
They're
puts a pretty
without
fine point
excuse.
on it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I found interesting that he asked me this question that night was I wanted to talk about Acts 17, 26 through 27, which states he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all face of the earth, having determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their habitation, that they would seek God, if perhaps they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. So there may, no, let me rephrase that. I was about to say there may be a reason why God put them on. There is a reason why God put them on that remote island.
Yeah. If they have died outside of him, they're on that island because they were never going to be part of his people. Now, that answer may not be satisfactory
Right.
to Guy or to others. That doesn't make it untrue. You may not like that answer. It doesn't make it untrue. So if it's true, and it is because Acts 17 says it, if it's true that God determines everything about your life, when you live, where you live, how long you live, this is why God primarily saves his people through families. So God decided, Sean, to save you before the foundation of the world. We know that because that's what Ephesians 1 says. So how did he go about doing that? He put you in a Christian family.
Mm-hmm.
That's how he did that.
Yeah.
He gave you Christian parents. He gave you a Christian wife. That's how he did that. And through that series of relationships and being exposed to the gospel, it eventually got through.
Yeah. That alone does not ensure your salvation.
It does not.
But just like
That's right.
he primarily works through the means of evangelism, a covenantal family aspect makes complete sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is how he does it. So we need to embrace that. So if you were born into a Christian family, there's a better than not chance that God has ordained to save you before the foundation of the world. Again, not 100% guarantee, but so this is why Christian parents, you should hold every confidence in the world that your kids are going to become Christians. Mm-hmm. If they don't now, eventually you were well into adulthood, Sean, when you converted. So hold every confidence in the world, because this is a primary way that the Lord saves his people, mm-hmm. is by placing them in Christian families. Why is it true in the Proverbs that, train up a child in the way he should go? When he's old, he will not depart from it. Because this is what God does. Mm-hmm. He's gracious and kind to put you in a Christian family. So this is why God gives you a believing spouse. Because if you're a pagan idiot and you have a Christian spouse that's going to help reel you in, that's a kind, merciful gift from God, who's trying to save you and is going to succeed.
Yep.
Just a matter of time. He wins.
Well, in reading Acts 17, 26 through 27, where we've been appointed where we are, rather than look at what someone else doesn't have, we should probably be grateful the fact that we were born in the United States, where there is a church on every street corner. Mm-hmm. Because that's the way I looked at it because I had the same question when I was young, and, and I had to point it back at myself. I'm like, well, if that's true, which it is because it's in the Bible, God has appointed me to be here, and I've got no excuse.
Yeah.
So
let's acknowledge the privilege that it is
mm-hmm. to
have been born in these United States with a church on every street corner, with a moral fabric even built into our law code, and all of that. I mean, what a good thing. And if you don't see the gift that is, if you would condemn that, you need to travel outside of the United States more, go into some third world developing nations, and then come back and tell me how bad America is. You got to be kidding me. Get out of your American bubble with your $1,000 cell phone that you tweet about how terrible America is. Go out into the real world and see how broken and harsh it is. And then come back and see how good you really have it. And be grateful to the Lord for appointing you to live in this time, in this day, in this place. That's a wonderful thing. And then to get rightly evangelistic here at the end, as we talk about Paul being so evangelistic in Athens. So, dear listener, who lives in this wonderful country with a church on every street corner, and the gospel being so well known it's assumed. If you reject that, every church you pass is an indictment for your eternal condemnation. Every one of them. Every Christian you know is an indictment against you that will serve as justification for your eternal separation from God in hell. All of them. You had all of this. You didn't just have general revelation.
You had
special revelation. You had bookstore. You had Walmart that sells copies of the Bible, and you rejected all of it. You will rightly be in hell more so than the tribe on the island.
I mean,
No
I've heard
excuse.
that argument
No
before.
excuse whatsoever.
There will be more.
You've been presented with
You'll be
more
punished
opportunity.
harsher
Yep.
Yeah.
than that tribe
Yep.
on the island.
There is every justification in the world for God to condemn you forever because you've rejected all of the opportunities that he gave you.
Are you going to say something, Scotty?
Well, no, I was just thinking no pressure on us that
Yeah.
have all this availability.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
on a joking side, no pressure. I mean,
Yeah.
Oh,
And this
I've got a
is why-
sarcasm sign over
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry.
no pressure. One, to be a faithful believer in a culture that helps towards that, and this is also why we do global missions. This is why the American church needs to wake up and get more involved in global missions because we have all the money. It's just a fact. I mean, let's just call it what it is. If the American church would get its act together and fund global missions like it should, we would accomplish the Great Commission in our lifetime.
Yeah.
But we're so busy spending money on stupid stuff here that we don't need to impress other churches that we don't even like so that we can feel better about ourselves of look at how awesome we are. If we would funnel those resources to go and take the gospel to the nations, goodness gracious.
So a $1 million sound system that exceeds the amount.
Probably
Okay.
unnecessary.
Except that island, that dude got picked off at 100 yards with a spear in a canoe. I'm not
Impressed? You're impressed by that?
not going there.
Yes.
Yeah.
I remember reading that
Yes.
article.
That's serious skill.
Yeah.
That is serious
Yeah.
skill. Well, and if you remember when he did it, the American Christian world pretty much condemned him. Like, why would you do that? Why would you even go? Why would you try to insert yourself into a culture that's happy and content the way?
Oh,
that
I don't remember that
Even
reaction.
quote unquote Christians are saying this, and it took a while finally because the world condemned him for being so stupid, and saying, "Well, good. I'm glad they killed you. That was stupid." Finally, the Christian world came around to say, "Good for him. Good for him for trying," knowing because everyone who's ever gone to that island has died.
Yeah.
They've killed 100% of outsiders. So good for him for at least attempting to take the gospel to a lost and dying island.
But Broadway won't be going there.
I'm not leading that trip. But I mean, you guys can. I mean,
But
whatever.
this is essentially what Paul was doing every day.
Yeah.
Every day.
Every day.
Every day.
Ugh, to have that.
It's convicting.
passion.
Isn't
It is
We need
convicting.
to-
It is
we need to-
convicting.
You're terrible,
But Paul-
especially.
Listen, man, we're a bunch of wusses.
Yeah.
We're soft.
We are.
And there's a reason we are inspired by these great men.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We've run out of time.
We have.
We went long.
Did we?
We did. Yeah. You guys, thank you. Hold on.
You got to figure out the buttons.
There we go. That sounds better.
Nailed it.
Good job.
You
Did-
guys,
you
thank you
did
for
all right
joining us.
today.
I don't know. We'll see if everything works out. We're going to leave it up to John, I think, to
You probably didn't
put all
hit
this together.
record.
I probably. It did. It's red. It's red. You all got a little nervous there.
Yeah, I did.
That was a fun podcast. I'd hate for just, us to just be looking at each other and talking. So, you guys, thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.